This is an on-the-fly continuing conversation coming out of an actual conversation me and Jim were just having. For those of you who don't know us, I hope you do by now. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG. I am also a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG since 2018. And of course, I'm here with the amazing, and I'm so curious about, Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, I'm Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modiphius Entertainment. These last 7 years, heading into year 8 here pretty soon. I think we're still in year 7. I'd have to look. I'm taking my hat off tonight. Like I wear a hat all the time, and my hair's growing out. I've been doing I cover everything. Project manager, line editor, Star Trek Adventures RPG. Oh, and co-host on this here show with Michael after these last 70 episodes. Happy to be here. Happy to chat with you. Just based on that conversation we just had offline, we're thinking about a short episode here talking about us.
Yeah, letting our hair down. That's why you took the hat off.
We're full of ego, but we're just like, what an episode about what makes us who we are and what takes interesting. I don't know. I mean, if you've been watching the show from the beginning, you've been with us for 70 episodes. You probably have a sense, but I guess this is going behind the scenes or deeper under the. I
want to. Well, I think I oftentimes, one of the things I start telling people about myself, because they would never believe it until they really get to know me. If you ask any of my close friends, they know it. I'm an introvert. I actually don't like being in crowds. I thought I did as a young person and kind of burnt out. And I love Zoom. Believe me, for some people, the pandemic was hard. I know you've spoken about that. It's hard in some veins. For some people like me, it was like, wow, this is like paradise. I was in the zone. Well, I have a question about for you, because you've talked about it a little bit, and I'm intrigued by it just because I've always loved the stage plays. I love acting. I love dialogue. What got you into that? When was like the first time you ever dabbled into the performing arts?
The first time, it was like 4th grade. The little elementary school I was in New York City, we were doing I want to say it was Cinderella, but it might not have been Cinderella. It might have been like a version of Cinderella, or it might have been something else. But like I can remember it was compulsory theater, right? We were all expected to be involved in it. So we all had to find a role to do. And I remember I don't remember a lot, because I don't remember a lot about my childhood. I think it's because I had a concussion when I was little, and I lost a lot of it. And I remember bits and pieces, but I remember the stories more than I actually remember the actual events. So I don't know if it's really accurate or not. But this show, though, I remember I was so excited to be involved in it that I was one of the king's dudes, because we were all wearing like paper mache sashes and belts, and we had like fancy suits on and stuff, and we all had to learn how to do a dance. And of course it was the classic we didn't want to get cooties, so we were like dancing at arm's length. But like the director needed somebody to ring a bell, and needed like an announcer or something, and like I was the only kid raising my hand to want to do it. It's like, oh, can I run from the dance over to the piano to ring the triangle to be the bell, and then I can run up to the front to do the announcements. And like I think I was self-conscious enough to know that there were other kids in the show, and that I wanted to make sure that other kids had other things to do. But like I don't think any of the other kids ever raised their hand to want to volunteer or anything. And so I was the only person volunteering to do stuff. Mm-hmm. So she gave me like 4 things to do in this play. I think we only did 2 performances. So I did it all, and it was fun. But then I got out. I didn't do any more theater until after I graduated college. Actually, I was in college. I had to take some electives to fill out my degree, and I was like, well, stage combat sounds cool. I'll do that. And I'd already taken a bunch of Shakespeare and.
You said stage combat?
Yeah, stage combat. So it's a way of doing stage fighting, safely, but still making it look cool. and making it look, good and telling a story to the audience. So it's a hand-to-hand fighting. It's a staff. It's sword, rapier, two-handed swords, etc.
Okay.
There's a whole thing around stage combat and
Wow.
doing it safely. So I took a couple of electives on stage combat. I took a couple of electives on acting because I'm a huge introvert. Like it may not come across this because this is safe. Like this is super safe. I'm
Exactly.
I can do whatever the hell I want.
I feel you. That's why I love it.
But I was such a huge introvert. I knew that like as I was starting to head into the professional world, I had to do something. And at the time, I didn't know what Toastmasters was. If I had known what Toastmasters was, many moons ago, I would have absolutely joined it right away, even though I would have been scared and nervous to do it. But theater seemed relatively fun and safe. And I knew some friends who had done theater, and they said, "Oh, Jim, you should try doing theater," because of all the RPG experience I had, right? Because doing RPGs, I was doing character voices, I was doing character mannerisms, I was making up story. I was already doing the acting without really having any training to do it. So it was an easy transition to go from RPGs into theater. And so I took those electives in school, and it was a fun experience. It was interesting to try it out. But then as soon as I graduated from college, because like when I was going to college, I was working full time to cover bills and expenses and life and shit. And then I was doing school part-time, which is why it took me forever to get my degree, because like there's only so many classes you can take when you're going part-time. And for certain degrees, I mean, I was just an English major and history minor. Like in order to finish my degree, I had to wait for certain classes to be available, and they didn't always offer them every semester. So I ended up taking random classes here and there. But anyway, long story. So when I was going to school, like all my time was committed. Like I was either working or I was going to class. I didn't have time for much of anything other than that. And of course, I was in the DC metro area, so I was, anytime I wasn't at work or at school, I was commuting. Right? So that's your choices, really.
Right.
But the moment I graduated from school, I suddenly had all this free time, and I was losing my mind. I was like, "What do I do with all this free time? I can't stand it because like I've got nothing to do except go to work." And I was bored. And my sister, bless her, she said, "Well, you've got those theater experiences from school. Why don't you go audition for a show? There's tons of community theaters in the Northern Virginia area. Why don't you go to audition for something?" And I was like, "Oh, why didn't I think of that?" And then literally that day, I pulled up the local newspaper and I looked in the arts and entertainment section, all 2 pages of it. And there was a local theater group that had just started like 6 months prior to that. And they were holding auditions for Robin Hood, or a version of Robin Hood. And I happened to have that stage combat experience, right? And Robin
perfect.
Hood is a very fighting kind of show. I was like, well, if nothing else, I got the fighting experience, so I could go try that.
I have to ask you, when you do an audition like that too, I have to ask a question. When you do an audition like that, do they give you the script ahead of time, or do you just walk in and grab a piece of paper?
It could be both. So for Robin Hood, though, because I had literally of course this is my first ever audition. I had no idea. They had short snippets of dialogue called sides, right? And they had certain sides that you could read, and they would say, number 7 and number 14, come on up, and I want you to read Robin Hood. I want you to read Maid Marian, or I want you to read Robin Hood. I want you to read Little John, or whatever. And so they had different snippets of the script that they would hand out to different people, and they would pair you up in different ways, try to get a sense of like how are the actors riffing off each other, how are they working with each other, or are they just staring at the paper doing the lines, which is different.
Did you use an accent?
No, and only because the director specifically asked us at the beginning, like when they were doing their introductions, the director specifically said, "Please, for the love of all that don't do an accent unless you can make it convincing," right? Like don't just put on a posh accent just for the sake of doing it because you think it's necessary. Just, we want to hear your natural voice, and which I thought was good because a lot of us were pretty hammy as it was, and so we just played it straight. And, I mean, we tried to emote and do the work and do the scene, but we didn't put on any airs or anything. I think there were a couple of people who did, and because they were the only ones doing it, it felt really fake.
Right.
And awkward. And then they would go up for another round, and they would cut the accent, which was to their credit.
Yeah,
Um,
I figured it would be kind of like karaoke. The people who try too hard,
right.
it just really comes off bad. Yeah.
Um, but then to answer your question in another way, the other way you can approach auditions, especially for community theater, although I'm sure it's true for professional theater too, is if you know the show, if you know what they're auditioning ahead of time, it is super easy to go buy a stage play or to go buy a copy of the play. I mean, there's several websites that specialize in selling stage plays,
Mm.
and there's plenty of books. Plenty of stage plays have been published in books and collections and stuff. So if you know that your local theater group is going to be doing Neil Simon's California Suite, go buy yourself a copy of California Suite. It's like $5 off of Dramatist Play Services or one of the other ones. I think there's 3 or 4 play services that will sell you the actual script in the same kind of format that you would get if you get cast and they give you the script, right? So if you read that ahead of time, get a feel for the characters, get a feel for the ones that are probably in your wheelhouse of capabilities. Like me personally, I'm a character actor. I'll never be the lead in anything, and I have accepted that a long time ago.
Mm.
But the character roles are fun, right? The character roles are the ones that really people dig and get the best lines and the funniest moments or whatever. So like I'll read a stage play and I'll read it cover to cover, and be like, okay, I think I could do this role or this role or this role. And maybe if it's a big show with a lot of cast, maybe I would, if it's the right show in the right circumstances, I would be happy to do like third spear carrier from the left, or bit player who has 2 lines but has a really cool amount of things to do on stage or something.
So what's the biggest audience you play to, you think?
I mean, when we're talking, community theater, pretty small time. I think the biggest audience I had was maybe 700, 800 people.
That's pretty big.
Maybe actually, I was in a couple of musicals. I'm not a singer, but I was playing some of the non-musical roles, and I think a couple of those performances we may have topped out around 900 or 1,000. I mean, the challenge is that we're usually, community theaters are usually in school auditoriums or the like, and I think the biggest, I mean, like we had space in a high school at one point, and I think their auditorium only seated like 1,200. Okay. But I think like there were 2 nights of it was either Wizard of Oz or one of the other big ones. I don't remember now.
Well, I think that's cool. I mean, I'd love to find some photos of you or video of you actually doing that. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. A long
time ago, man. That was. I mean, I've got them, but
I would love to see those. But the best stage play I saw of West Side Story was actually a college. I went to Skyline College, and I went there with a really bad attitude, like this is gonna suck. I just went there such a bad attitude with some friends, and I had a blast. I mean, they put their heart into it. The love story was so well acted, and to this day, even when I watch West Side Story, the original movie, which of course has the most amazing soundtrack ever, especially if you listen to it in a theater, it's like amazing. Yeah. But I go back to that and I'm like, wow. And that's when I got into actually going to smaller community plays and stuff like that. You just never know. And it doesn't matter. I don't want to say that they're not good, because they are good. It's a different mindset. You're really just getting into watching them emote, and I just love that. So I love the small house is actually a little more better than Broadway, which is I like Broadway shows. There's some ones I definitely love, but I would take a community theater over Broadway any day, especially when people aren't doing it for money and glory and they're doing it for the art. You could tell the difference.
Yeah. Although I will push back just a little bit and say, like, if it's a professional production and it's done well, you can still get that real intimate connection with the actors. I think the American Shakespeare Center in Stanton, Virginia, they built a recreation of the Blackfriars Theater, and they do all their performances with the lights on, right? So like literally the seats to the theater, the seats around the stage are literally right on top of the stage. Like, I mean, you're literally 2 feet away from 3 to 5 feet away from the actors when they're performing. And in fact, they put they have like 4 or 5 premium seats that they put actually on the stage, and you're like literally sitting on the stage right there, like you're practically in the show because you're right there, right in their face. And So when the actors that are doing their stuff, right, they are able to see you and you're able to see them, and they can direct their lines right at you, and they can pull you, like, it pulls you in such a different way.
Yeah.
You're way up in the nosebleed seats watching the show from way down. Like, you just can't get into it that way. It's different.
See, I'm the kind of guy with artists where I feel for them because I have such stage fright, and I believe me, I can get on stage, and part of my job is getting on stage and performing for thousands of people and motivating and stuff like that. And I can do it, and afterwards I have serious back pain and I need to hide and watch Star Trek for 12 days. But the reason I think I like it, I cheer on performers, and so you can go see, of course, a great show, Janet Jackson in concert, Beyonce, Dolly Parton, and they're just polished. So I don't have to worry about them as much. I worry about the little guy in the stage play in a small jazz band. And when they mess up, I'm the first one to cheer them on. So I think I get more connected with the smaller productions, and because I want them to succeed so badly. I don't feel the same way if I'm at a Justin Timberlake concert.
Oh, interesting. I thought you're the big jazz fan, right? I thought isn't the old saying that there's no wrong notes in jazz?
Exactly. Yeah. So
you can't never really mess up.
It's true, but you know what I mean. So, but the nerves that they go through. Like, I'm one of the people, I sympathize for a lot of these artists who end up becoming addicts, because I remember once I had to have a surgery, and I'm the kind where at night my mind's always going. So if I have a project or something coming up, even if it's a speech or a lecture, I can't fall asleep. I'm asleep, but my brain is solving problems. I used to do that when I owned my own ad agency. I would come up with the best lines and jingles at night, and I would wake up and have to write them down at 2 a.m. And so when I had surgery, though, and they put me under, I remember waking up and my dad was there, and he asked me, like, "How you feeling?" And I went, "I never slept so well in my life, because my brain stopped working. It was just out. It's what you're supposed to be doing." And so I've always had this place in my heart, whether it's an Elvis or a Michael Jackson or these performers or Marilyn Monroe, who, because they're so creative, they become addicts or put themselves under at night to sleep. And that's just so problematic, so I always get nervous for the performer. Because it's putting yourself out there. It's a very vulnerable position in life.
Yeah. Especially theater. Like, I can easily see how people can get addicted to theater, but also get into substance abuse and other stuff, because it is such a high to be so creative, like in such a concentrated fashion. Because like most theater productions I'm familiar with, you do the auditions, you do the rehearsals, and then you do like 2 or 3 weeks of performances, and that's compressed into about 12 to 14 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. So you get this super intense period of time where you're in a group of 12 to 30, 50, however many people are in the production, of other creative people, and you're creating this thing. You're a family, and you're creating this thing for a very compressed period of time. And then you get to perform it, and you get to get the audience involved in it. You get their reactions, which is immediate, right? It's not like writing a book and waiting for reviews to come in. Like, the reaction is immediate, because you can hear them laugh or cry or sigh or whatever. You get that instant feedback, which is always a boost. Even if they hate you, if they're making noise, then you're doing something right? When they're quiet, then you got to worry. And then you want to go to the next show, and then the next show, and the next show, and then all of a sudden, like in my experience, you've gotten the bug, and you've strung together 4 years of this, just constant one show after another, and you get burned out. And then I got burned out. Like, I got burned out big time, and I was like, I just can't. I need a break. And I actually slept. Like, when I finally didn't get cast in a show, I was crushed, of course, because I had been cast in everything I had auditioned for up to that point. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I get to take a break. I get to do my laundry and clean the house and like actually read a book or something, and I don't have to just focus on the script or the actors or the theater or whatever. And then you look back and you go, gosh, I was going 100% on that, and now I'm burned out, and I need a break. I need to recharge. Yep. And then if you're like me, you take a break, you recharge, and then you reflect on what you learned, hopefully, and then you're like, oh, now I can be a little more discerning. Right, I don't have to accept literally every role I'm offered. I can take a break, and I can be a little more choosy. And
I love hearing you say that. I literally, Yeah, it was hard for me in about around 2013, where I was doing a lot. I was doing a lot at work. I was doing a lot personal life. I was doing a lot, even if it was going to a lot of social gatherings, things I thought I had to do. And then I eventually burned out, and I went very introverted at that point. Like, I only wanted to be with me at the gym, my wife. I didn't want people coming over. And what's interesting is, I developed a lot of muscle problems and stuff like that, like just from tension and stuff. And you said you develop wisdom, because then I was like, why am I doing this? And I'll admit, I'll be the first person. I had someone to talk to help me through it. And why was I putting all of this on myself? And what's interesting about the pandemic is, all of a sudden, no one could come over. And at that same time is when you approached me, because of Continuing Mission during the pandemic, and was like, hey, do you want to write? And that was the perfect time to ask, because all the noise was out of my life. Yeah. I had time. I was home. I was in my zone. And really, it taught me a lot. Like, this is a good spot to be in. And I want to stay, like, just because when the pandemic ended, I actually kind of panicked, because people were like, oh, I can't wait to see you. And all the calls start coming in. I was like, oh no, that's how I was, because I had found this sweet spot. But what I did is, coming out of it, I just came out more balanced. And being like, okay, I can't do more than one big gathering every 3 months. Let's have people over in small controlled groups one time a weekend. It doesn't have to be every day. And that allows me now my creative side, where I can actually, I like writing anyways, but now I really I'm kind of jealous of that time, that creative space. I don't think I could ever do a stage play. I probably would lose a spleen over it. but I definitely needed a creative outlet, or I feel very dark mentally,
Interesting. A couple of thoughts there. Like, this is a non sequitur. We don't have to go into the detail on this, but you mentioned that before the pandemic ended, it's like, I don't think it's over.
You're right.
I think it's still with us.
Yeah. But people don't act like it.
I know. I mean, they weren't acting like it during the pandemic.
Yeah. So I can no longer tell people, like, no, you can't come over. What, are you crazy? I used to be able to say that for about 2 years, but not anymore.
We're still being pretty careful. We just, like, we're doing the best we can, but I've never been a fan of big gatherings anyway. I'm an introvert. Like, I like small group discussions, small group conversations. Like if I'm in a big group conversation, I will immediately look for the people with the cats, or I'll look for people that are geeks like me, and then we can go sit down somewhere and within the bigger atmosphere and talk about Star Trek, or talk about video games, or board games, or RPGs, or whatever. And like, you just have to kind of like seek them out, and because like, I hate small talk. Oh my god, small talk just drives me.
I know. I have this weird personality, though, that when I'm in a room, it starts with like the kids gravitating toward me, and then I'm kind of like running to different rooms, and then I'm annoyed by them, and I tell them I love. First of all, I'm gonna say I love kids, but I tell them, when my interaction with them is like, why are you bothering me? I don't have children. Why are you talking to me? And then for some reason that endears them to me, and I'm like, go away, you're no use to me, and then they'll still follow me. So I have this. My wife is like, well, why do you like go to Ma? And I was like, well, because they just need to know that, not everyone has to like them, but I do like them, but that's kind of my shtick with them. So I have this thing when I'm in a gathering, my wife watches as I move to quiet room to wherever people aren't, whether it's the front yard, backyard, downstairs, I move, and then she'll say people trickle to that location, and then I'm forced to move again. Yeah, that's weird when that happens, right? Like, I tend to gravitate, again, I'm a cat person, so I tend to gravitate to wherever the cat is, and I'll spend time with the cat. And it'll be quiet, and I'll have my snack or my drink or whatever, and I'll be hanging out with the cat and maybe talking to one or two other people. And then I'll see the flow will come toward me. It's like, oh, it's time to get up and go refresh my beverage and get some snacks. Or oh gosh, is that the time? Oh well, I now. I'm notorious for never saying goodbye, because if one person hears you say goodbye, then you have to say hi. You're obligatory. You have to say bye to everybody. So I'll just my wife knows sign language like I do, and so fortunately, if we're in a crowd of people where no one knows sign language, I'm like,
time to go.
She knows I do it just real quick, and then I just disappear. I'll wait in the car for her to catch up. I'm
gonna go warm up the car. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. Exactly.
Interesting. I think that for coming up, going back to like talking about Star Trek Adventures and comic book conventions coming up. I went to San Diego Comic-Con for 7 years in a row, 150,000 people. And believe me, it was painful, but I was working. I was doing my comic at the time. I was building up my manga. And I do know that, being behind the booth, I felt safe because people could just line up. But like outside the booth, I was never the outside a booth kind of mingler. And then I leave immediately to like a small cafe or coffee shop. I don't go to the parties after. I'm just let me find a couple people who I sync with and go talk and eat dinner with them,
Yeah, I was exactly the same way, Michael, at Gen Con. I went to Gen Con in 2017 for the launch of the book, the Star Trek Adventures, the core book. And I'd never been to Gen Con before. I have friends who've gone year after year after year and loved it. And I was always like, I'd like to go, but it's like 70,000 people. I don't want to be around 70,000 people. Like I get anxious being around like 7 people, like much less 70,000. And it was I always found an excuse. It was the expense. It was the time. It was the drive. It was the flight. I mean, whatever. But my other argument was like they're going to sell all kinds of stuff there, but I can buy all that stuff at my game store or online or something. So like, why would I go to a convention to buy it and have to haul it all home? Right. I can just have it shipped to me. But then I went in 2017 and like you were just saying, like I was on, like I was working the booth. I was working the crowd. I was hand selling the books. And I absolutely felt safer behind the cash register than I was like getting out on the floor. Like when it was slow, it was like, well, there's no reason to just stand behind the booth here. So I need to kind of like walk out and kind of wander. Right. It was like the anchor was pulling me back, and it was like, oh, I want to be safe behind the booth or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I like it because it's the controlled line. And I really love intimate conversations. Like I don't care who the human being is. If I have one person, I'm going to ask questions. It's probably why we do this show. I have no trouble interviewing people, having open-ended questions. No one's ever boring to me. Wait, have I ever met a boring person? No, there is one person I met who is boring. I'm sorry. In my life, there is one person who I do believe is boring. I'll never say it out loud, but I struggle to have a conversation with them because their responses are so. Yeah. Anyways, but I love like when I'm in public, and for the people who are watching this, just know I may be an introverted, but I really am interested in people. I just want to get to know you. I'm not into surface conversations. I will ask you questions until all of a sudden I'm finding out stuff that you haven't even vocalized ever. And nothing personal, but it's just like, I want to hear what's in your brain. It helps me write, in my opinion. It helps me delve into the complexity of humanity. It's a really nice thing. So for those of you who do meet me at a con one day, if I'm behind a booth, which I most likely is the only reason I would even be there, come up and talk to me. Don't hesitate. I do want to get to know you. So I'm going to put that disclaimer out there.
Yeah, I'm the same way, Michael. And in fact, I'm guilty of it when I did because I did Gen Con 17, 18, and 19, right? Because I was supporting the game, so I was working the booth. But I wanted, like, even at the very first one, I wanted, like, people wanted us to sign their book, which is fine. But I wanted them to sign my book, right? So like every time somebody came up to the booth to buy one of the core books, I was like, "And would you sign my book? Would you sign my book?" And so I'd start up this conversation. And I would kind of forget about the fact that there was a line of people waiting to buy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, I can't really have meaningful conversations with these people over and over and over and over again. I need to just kind of move things along here.
That is hard.
Then I kind of wanted to move off to the side a little bit and have like buy the thing, and then I'll move over to the side and you can sign my book and I'll talk to you about it. And
that's why it's good to have rotational coverage at those. When I did my booth, there were 4 of us. I had 2 of my friends. I had the artists with me, and then I had 2 of my friends who were so cool, and they would push some product. But like, especially if I always feel that anyone who buys one of my art pieces, because it's my writing, that I want them to have memories to connect later on with. Right. I know when I buy art, if the artist is there when I'm buying it, I'm more akin to buy it and then bring it home and tell a story with it. So I kind of try to give people a story, if they're part of product.
I think it's a great opportunity. And I wish there was a good way to do it virtually, other than like virtual conventions that not enough people are doing. But it really changes the relationship when you can actually meet the people, you can actually meet the names that are in the book, right? It's not just it's not just a list of faceless names that put the book together, because who knows these people from anybody else. But when you actually get to meet the person and talk to them and shake their hand and just interact with them, then you're like, oh wow, this is a person. I mean, it's like when I was younger, I worked at Walden Books, and I would be shelving the fantasy and science fiction novelists and stuff, and be like, oh, these people are like high tier, amazing people because they've written these books. And then it wasn't until I joined, SIFWA, and I was like, oh, these people are just like normal people. Like they have good days and bad days, and some of them are real a-holes, and some of them are really nice people. And all I knew was their name on a book, and that they provided these great stories. And then you actually get to know the person behind all that stuff, and it's really fascinating to do that. And it's the same way with games, right? Like I got to meet a lot of people at Gen Con that I would have never have met otherwise. And it's like, oh yeah, you wrote that game and you wrote that book, and it's like, oh, now I know you a little bit better, and it gives me a little bit better understanding of what they're doing with the game and stuff, which is always exciting. So
it is
for those opportunities.
Yeah, and and for me, and this is why Continuing Missions got started as a blog with Tony Pye and everyone else, Colin Wilson, who got started, is I am equally fascinated with the fans. Oh, this is weird how it's translating into my thing with stage theater. Oh, interesting. And I started the blog to celebrate the fans as much as the writers, because we all dream of being writers. A lot of us, I shouldn't say we all, many of us dream of being writers or in some way creatively connected with our favorite IPs. And just because of the nature of the beast and the percentages of law, a lot of us are never going to be. It's just going to be hard. But at the same time, the ideas are equally good. You're just not being paid for them generally, and I think celebrating that when I'm at a comic convention, I gravitate toward the small indies. I want to know who you are. What's the story about? And I'm going to pick it up and support them just because maybe one day I'll see him. I remember there was a comic book. I forget the name of the writer now, but it was Whiteout was the name of the comic book. Whiteout, beautiful cover. I bought 4 of the books, and I was talking to the artist and to the writer, and had a nice conversation with him, asking about the motivation behind the book, and the art was so cool. And then 2 years later, they're getting a movie, and I was like, I talked to them, and I just thought it was so cool that I spent the time with them and got an autograph. It's this independent, and seeing them be successful, even though I haven't met them since, it was just like the biggest thing to me. So that's really the motivation behind Continuing Mission for me too, is I think everybody I meet at some point is going to do something great. And it'll be nice that, if I know them and had some details about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's amazing who you can meet and who crosses your path, and see where they go. And it's really cool stuff.
Yeah. And it circles back to everything that we talk about on Star Trek Adventures, as the long way around, get back to the purpose of this. I think that there's motivation. I know, I've had many off the record conversations with you about how appreciative people are of you opening up the gates for amateurs such as myself, or budding writers to get a chance to have a piece of iconic IP. And I think it's because you have that community theater creative background, and you're not, I don't want to say you're not in it for the money. I don't know if you are or not. But you're in it for the art, from my opinion. You love Star Trek, you're passionate about it, and you want to share that passion and, with other people, have the experience. That's what I perceive. You have to tell your own story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the RPG industry, by and large, is not an industry you get into for the money, right? Unless you're working for, I don't know, Wizards of the Coast and maybe Paizo. You do it more than anything else. You do it for the passion. I'm the project manager, I'm the line editor. I have race just like you do on writing and editing, etc. Is it a lot of money? No, but that's why most of us have day jobs, right?
Right.
Day job to pay the bills and to survive and live and thrive. But this is really truly a passion thing, and I appreciate the money, but I'm here for the fans, and I'm here for Star Trek, and That's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I love podcasts about creators. Like some of my favorite podcasts is Delta Flyers, with Garrett Wong and Bobby Duncan McNeil. And I encourage people who are interested in Hollywood or in the industry, get autobiographies, because Frank Oz said something that I'll always remember. He says, it took me 20 years to become an overnight success. And the reason why I say that is because oftentimes we're impressed by these people who show up on TV or they get a book or movie deal. But believe me, if you looked at what took them to get there and you looked at them 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you wouldn't be impressed, which is sad because you should be, because they're working, they're hard, they're trying, they're starving artists. I tell people all the time, my nieces and nephews, same thing. It's like, right. If someone loves playing the guitar, they don't wait to cut an album to play the guitar. They just do it every day out of the passion. And some people are discovered and some people aren't, but they still get fulfillment out of playing the guitar. Writing, drawing is exactly the same way. Like, yes, do I love the fact that I get to, because I write RPG anyways, whether or not I'm paid or not. Is it nice to get a little check for it? Sure. I'm not going to complain about it, but whether or not I'm still doing it. And that's where you're going to really find the people who perfect their craft over decades.
Yep.
And again, a small percentage will one day get fortunate and be seen by somebody or shake the right hand. But for those wanting to play with us, we want fans and professionals alike, right? It doesn't make a difference for Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, part of it's the tradition of Star Trek, really. I think back in the heyday when Next Gen and DS9 were on the air, I think even Voyager, of course, that was network television at the time, so they had a machine, right? They had to get 26 episodes a season into the pipeline, and Next Gen, I think after season 2 or 3 or something, they opened up the floodgates and said any fan, anybody, whether you're agented or unagented, if you can write a spec script and mail it into their slush fund and into their slush pile, they had the writers, the staff writers would spend most of their day working on the show, but then they were all reading slush too, and so they'd read scripts, and they like the ones that they liked, they would invite those writers in to pitch stories, right? So there's a tradition there of Star Trek of bringing the fans into it, and I mean that's how I got my start with Star Trek, was the Strange New Worlds anthology, short story anthology series. We talked about that a little bit, and that was opening the floodgates. Anybody who thinks they could write a professional grade short story, mail it in, the judges would review them and take the best 20 or so and publish them, and all of a sudden you got a professional writing credit. Right? Cool. And it's those little pieces that start building the foundation of whatever you're doing, whether it's a career or just a beautiful passion project that you're responsible for. Like I love indie writers and indie comic creators and stuff, and on the rare occasions I go to a convention anymore, I always try to go into the artists the alley, artist alley, whatever it's called, and check out the writers and see what they're doing, because I mean that's me, right? Yep. I mean, I might be working for Modiphius, but I'm still an indie at heart. And like if tomorrow Modiphius lost the license to Star Trek, I'd be one of your most frequent contributors on exactly. Conversations, right? Because I'm still going to be writing. I'm still going to be playing the game. I'll still be loving the game. I don't need to be paid to love to do it. I mean, it's certainly nice to happen, but I know that continuing conversations will not be going anywhere anytime soon, even if the game moves on to another company at some point in the future, because honestly, that's the nature of IP games anyway. Like eventually someone else is going to pick it up. I don't know when or why or how, but it's just the sad truth of life is that nothing lasts forever, right? So that's just in the back of my mind. Somewhere in the back of my mind,
our creativity does. So no one can.
Our creativity will always be there.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I'm going to encourage people to listen and read books about people who've struggled to create, because to me it's inspiring. Like, just don't stop. You just never know what's going to be picked up. I think a lot of these screenplay writers, they have hundreds of screenplays sitting on their shelf, and then 25 years later, someone somehow gets their hand on it. And to me, it's just produce for the love of it. And even in the future, I've taken old stories and reworked them into Star Trek Adventure modules because no one else was seeing them. It was in my private box. No one else is sharing. And now I get to rework concepts and get them printed. So that would be my encouragement to everybody out there.
And I would follow on to that to say, um, uh, everything. I'm targeting writers specifically, right? Because we're talking about writing more than anything else. Because we're both writers. I think everything you write is practice for the next one, right? And I know a lot of writers don't like to hear practice. Like, practice is a 4-letter word for some people because I don't want to practice. I just want to be perfect right away. It's like, well, you can't. It's not possible, right? Even if you're Mozart, you still have to practice. So like everything you write, whether it's a drabble or a short story or a novel or a screenplay or a stage play or RPG module or whatever, it's all practice for the next thing. And none of it's wasted. None of it's bad. Like I read a lot of novice writers out there who are like despondent that they had to cut 2,000 words or 5,000 words from their story or their novel or whatever. It's like, it's okay. You were on a path and you realized it didn't work. That's still 2,000 to 3,000 words of practice that you got in. And then, but you were smart enough to see that it wasn't working. So you went back and then you started it over again, or
Exactly.
a different attack. And it's okay. But like you said, though, like I think every writer I've ever met is a pack rat of some sort, whether they're keeping physical copies of their stuff or they're keeping electronic copies of their stuff, or they're keeping a mental tally of their stuff. They're always recycling stories or reusing stories, or they started writing a story and like some character came out of it that was really cool. It was the wrong fit for that story. They were like, oh, I'm going to cut that character out, but I'm going to hold on to that character and do another story with them at some other point because it might fit better somewhere else.
And you're always on. Like, I'm watching TV and movies and I'm constantly saying, oh, I could rework that for this. Oh, I like that character. Let me put them as a Cardassian. Yeah. Like, I'm constantly in that writer's creative mode. And even at work, my day job where I'm in communications and organizational development, all I do is get edited all day long. I'm writing stuff for the executives and for social media. And I just I'm so used to being edited in life. I learned not to take it personally anymore. And I will take it and reuse it somewhere else. One year they're like, oh no, edit this, blah, 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 blah. And then the next year I go use the old one. They're like, that's great. It's so many emotions, and the editor's opinion is, it's so whimsical, I've learned. Yeah. So don't throw anything away. You'd be surprised how people will react to something later. I remember I wrote, in fact, what's funny is I wrote when I was dating my wife, I wrote her a poem. And I'm the only one who appreciated the poem, and she appreciated the poem. And then when I did a comic book about 15 years later, I had a little rapper. His name was Red Rover, and I had a little rapper, and he was a kid, and he was trying to woo the girl on this play yard. And I said, okay, I need a really good rap. And I brought that poem back, and it ended up being published, and I'm like, wow, it's like something I wrote, 15 years ago for my wife to be romantic ended up being in my manga comic book, issue 3. And that just reminded me, like, don't throw anything away. You don't know when you get, and people, like when people were reading the comic who are getting reactions from, they were getting all teary eyed and choked up because the poem was so cute. And I was like, that's the reaction I wanted. My wife, she read it once, put it away. But, the people who read my comic, they liked it. They teared up a little.
There you go. So to bring this full circle back to theater, one of the, just as part of the somehow this has turned into writing advice. I don't know how that happens.
I don't know, because I said we're just gonna have a conversation today, get to know each other better. That's all.
Yeah. But that works, because I mean, writing's in my blood, and that's who I am. I'm a writer. But to take it back to theater for a moment, if you are a writer and you want to get more insights into how to write people, go audition for like, even if you have no intention of accepting the role, go audition for a community theater production in your area, because you'll get to go up on stage or in front of people, and you get to speak the words, because like stage plays are meant to be performed, right? They're not just meant to be read. Like Shakespeare is deadly dull on the page, honestly, but an actor can bring it to life, and like you need to feel the words in your mouth and to be able to emote and to do it, and it gives you it just changes the brain a little bit, so that when you sit down to start writing your next manuscript and you're doing the dialogue, you can actually start feeling how that dialogue actually works. That's why I love to read my stuff out loud. Yeah. When I do a draft, I try to read it out loud, or I try to have somebody read it to me so I can listen to it. That's why I love my Kindle. My Kindle will read it to me, which is such a godsend.
I do the same with all Microsoft Word. I do read aloud. Yeah.
Because just looking at it on the screen or on the page is one thing, but to actually hear the words, then you can start like, oh, that sounds really awkward. That like those 4 words in succession doesn't sound right. And to be honest with you, this is one of my complaints about children's books, because when my son was little, we read a ton to him, and there were some children's books that, like, I don't think the writer was thinking about somebody reading it out loud, because like it was just like really awkward phrasing and constructions and like consonants on top of consonants. It was like really hard to get some of these words out. And it's like, I like the story of this book, but I don't like the way it's written, because I just can't get it out. But yeah, so go see stage plays, go write stage plays, go act, go audition, absolutely audition, especially if you have stage fright. It's okay. Everyone, even the experienced actors have stage fright. Trust me, they just have learned skills to overcome it. And that's what we do, right? Especially as introverts, we have to learn how to flex and be extroverted for a little while, and then we go disappear for a week because we have to recharge.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. I think too, one of my things for writing is when I write, and then my goal is to get it down to the most concise sentence as possible. I am a firm believer in the beauty of the short sentence. A long sentence to me means it is necessary beyond measure to put more words in. But my goal is, when I'm writing, I first just write everything, and then I go in and just start cutting and try to get those sentences as short as possible. There's an author I love, and he's actually a writer for Star Trek Adventures, Marco Raffaella, and he has the book Where Fires End. And if you read Where Fires End, I'm going to recommend Mark Raffaella's book. His concise use of language, that entire book is a poem. He didn't mean to write it as a poem. It's a novel. But if you watch how his use of words, that's how I strive to be as a writer. I so admire him. And so, again, my thing is people try to create these big, complex, and they stress themselves out about having to write all this stuff. And like you said, when you open your mouth and read it out loud, it's like, no, that doesn't even make sense. Get to those short, punchy sentences. Yes, see Jane run. That's an acceptable sentence. I have it very clear in my mind what's happening there. And so that's something to, going back to writing advice or being in a play and articulating the words, you really learn about the beauty of cadence, of sentence structure, of how to put certain words together. It's just a wonderful art form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Jim, I enjoyed getting to know you better.
Yeah, ditto, buddy. I know we talk about this stuff all the time when we're not recording.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe there's like 2 people in our audience who cared enough to watch all this. I think we went on for like an hour, but
well, it's a labor of love. I remind people, we're not making money off this podcast. The reason we do it is because we talk about it anyways, and we're always trying to create a better product. For me, I was doing it before I was even writing, for it. Everyone wants to know if I have any selfish motivation whatsoever, is to keep getting people to play the game. So it's always there, and we're always getting professional level materials from the publisher, because again, I've been part of RPGs that fall away, and the quality of what fans can produce is not good. So if there's anything selfish, you're going to accuse me of anything, it's trying to keep it alive. So I have really beautiful hard copy books up on my shelf. Okay. So that's my selfish motive, but either way, I think people should know that maybe we're going to have an episode like this. Maybe you don't think it's the best episode ever, but this is what we're doing anyways. This is who we are,
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, for me, I guess it's selfish too, but in a different tack. Like I love Star Trek. I love everything about Star Trek, and Star Trek has changed. This is something we didn't really talk about, but I know we've talked about it at length on other episodes. Star Trek was really super, super formative into who I am, in terms of like how important it is to me to understand people from all different walks of life, religion, faith, creed, color, sexual orientation, et cetera, all across every spectrum that you can think of. Like that diversity, inclusion, equity, all that for me got its origination in Star Trek. Like when I saw the original series cast on the screen, and I was like, okay, this is something different than where I'm living at the moment. Because I was living on my dad was in the service. I was in a military base, which was very diverse. Like the military, fortunately at the time, even in the 70s, was pretty diverse. But my school weirdly was like primarily white. And I was like, no, this doesn't fit like what I know. And it was weird. But Star Trek was like, oh, this is something different. And that feels right. We're not just one color or gender or whatever, but, and I love Star Trek so much. I want to get more people into it. And, I love RPGs, right? I'm an RPGer to the core. And, the more people I can get into RPGs to discover the possibilities of the hobby, outside of the big huge tentpole games that are out there. Like there's so many other games that you can play. No knocks on those, because I love playing them too. I just have found other niches that I enjoy more. I love. Oh man, and this is me waxing poetic again. One of the unexpected, joyful side benefits of doing this gig is being able to, first talk to you and do this kind of a podcast, which is amazing. But like when I'm cranking away on an edit or something, and I need to take a break, I can go pull up YouTube or Twitch, and I can see gamers all around the world playing this game, or some form of Star Trek. And it's clear they're digging it and they're having fun and they're playing our modules, or they're playing their own stuff based on our modules, or they're just using our product or whatever. And like knowing that we put our heart and soul into those products, right? And they're using them at their game table, and they're coming up with their own amazing Star Trek adventures. That is the win for me right there. That's why
I agree.
Because I can see people are passionate about it, and they're getting into it and they're having fun. And it's like, oh, I helped enable that. That's so cool.
I love that too. Yeah. And then taking their own spins on it.
Yeah. It's
so
like,
cool.
I mean, in my professional world, like just within the last, 10 years or so, I've really kind of figured out that like I'm really passionate about helping people be better at what they do. And like making them more effective and making them more capable at their job, just by making little tweaks to their workflow or their day or whatever, and all of a sudden they're more productive. And I can see tangible results, and like I can see it happening with gamers. Like, oh, we make this thing, and then we try to give them a little guidance, and we try to give them opportunities to do cool stuff with our toolboxes. And then I see them do these amazing podcasts and Twitches and actual plays and stuff. And it's like, oh, we helped enable that. And it's like that's the best feeling, because I know how many amazing experiences I've had personally playing other games, not just Star Trek, but just in general. And like, until the internet came along, we didn't really have the means to tell the creators, you made something amazing that changed my life, right?
Right.
Positive. And now I get to see that happening with other people. Cool. It's like, this is so cool. Talk about addictive. We were talking about addiction a little bit earlier. It is kind of addictive to see that, because it's like if I'm stalled out on a project or on an editing something or whatever, I don't feel like reading pitches that night or whatever. I get re-energized watching other people, doing the game or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing this. It's because if I don't get this edit done, they're not going to have this cool stuff that somebody put their passion into to write. Right? Like if I'm not editing Michael's thing, you're not going to get to see it, and then you're not going to be able to create your own adventures with it. So I better get back to work.
Exactly. Yeah. And my thing is, just keep, podcasts like this or all the social media channels. I'm so happy to see new people walk through the door. We've had fans on here who've never been on a podcast before, just to talk about their passion. And I think it reinvigorates them to keep it going too, so that's what we're here for. We're a continuing conversation. This was all happenstance and unplanned and a wonderful happenstance in that case. So we're going to keep it going. And I always thank you, Jim. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the fans out there who stick with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity. I know that the handful of fans, well, I'm not going to be dismissive. Everybody who watched this to the end, hopefully you found some great nuggets of gold in here to pull out and make use of. I love doing that. That's why I love listening to writers just talk shop, because even if they're droning on and they're boring as hell, they might still drop in some nuggets of gold that I'll take and be like, oh, that's the thing I needed to get through my block or whatever.
Well, the stuff you need to know is actually free. I mean, I really believe that once you start talking to me, the stuff you need to know to become a great writer is actually free if you listen to these conversations a lot. And again, a lot of it is discipline and routine. It's just like you go to the gym, you got to make writing like going to the gym. I don't care if it's 15 minutes a day or an hour a day, but you just got to get your foot through the door, your fingers on the keyboard in that case. So that's why I think it's worth talking. I would have loved if someone would have had this conversation with me when I was 15 years old. I would have been even more disciplined. I was already writing at age 15, but if I knew somebody would have just said, just write to write, like you play the guitar, I would have taken off even more. So cool. All right. I think we're at gratitude time.
Okay.
Bricks and Mortars. I'm going to go give it to the Bricks and Mortars again. This time, Darren Kerr shouts out the Game Preserve. I love the name of that. The Game Preserve, Fashion Mall Commons, Indianapolis, Indiana. If that's not a creative name for a game shop, I don't know. That's awesome.
I love it. That's awesome. So my gratitude, Michael, thank you for starting continuing conversations.
The podcast.
In the podcast and inviting me in. Grateful for you all the time, even if I don't tell you. So thank you.
Thank you. Here. Likewise.
Thank you to all the writers, all the fans, especially all the fans. I mean, I can't thank you enough. I know I do it all the time, but it's still not enough because like I can see it every day. I can see their passion for the game and for Star Trek and how willing a lot of them are in helping new gamers come in. Because like, you know, we're lucky that we are doing a game based on an IP that has new content coming out on a regular basis, which we haven't seen for some games for a while. Right. And is creating new gamers all the time. And those new gamers are naturally coming to the game with the same questions. Like it's the same questions I've been seeing for 7 years now, but the fans are always very patient and just repeating the same answers over and over again. And it's great to see the fans do that. So thank you fans for doing that.
I'm a very cynical and dark humor kind of person. So I always think of like when I look at the YouTube videos or the podcast numbers, you know, like if the YouTube video has like 160, you know, views, then I figure, oh, one person a month has been watching it since we started this. You know, like also the people trickling in, you know, maybe we'll get to tipping point and all of a sudden it'll just snowball where we have millions of views. But
I mean, that's a whole different conversation, probably. I think Star Trek Adventures is more than ready for that tipping point. It's just a matter of like, who's it gonna like, what's gonna happen to knock that one domino over. And we've flirted with it, like behind the scenes, we've flirted with it a little bit. And I'm not sure the critical mass has quite happened yet, but
that's a critical mass. I tease because, you know, on my Twitter, if anybody follows me on Twitter, I'm going for 1 million followers. Okay. I'm like 999,900 away, but, you know, I shoot high and, you know, I'm going for 1 million followers. So follow me if you still use Twitter.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. Not to drag this on any longer, but, my son and I watch YouTube videos of, you know, specific channels. And the other day he was like, you know, how did this YouTuber get the little silver plaque or whatever? Like they were showing off the silver plaque on their episode or whatever. And I was like, oh, well, you know, they have, you know, 50,000 or, you know, 100,000 subscribers, whatever the target number. I don't know what it was. Right. So I said, you know, so this person has done enough content and enough interesting content that he's gotten this many people to subscribe to his channel. And that's all, you know, that's what it takes. Not to say that's all it takes, but that's what it takes is like, you just have to keep doing content and keep being interesting and keep engaging people. And I mean, that's all it is. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you love. And eventually interested people will flock to you.
I thought you were about to say, and then my kid asked, how many likes does your podcast get, Dad?
I don't even know. I don't pay attention to the numbers.
We don't. Right? Jeff sometimes let us know. Yeah.
That's not why I'm doing this, right? I'm not doing this to get numbers or to be an influencer or whatever all that BS is, but I just don't care. Like I'm passionate about this. I know you're passionate about it. And somehow we're connecting with people who are equally passionate about it, whether they're fans or professionals or somewhere in between. And I love the fact that we're able to invite, you know, not to say Joe Average Fan, but like we'll invite everybody onto this show if we can talk to them.
I'm your average geek. I'm proud to say I'm your average geek. I'm not over the top. I'm not knowledgeable, but you know, I'm a working person who has to make a living. And so I can't, you know, I envy these people who know every single IP and details about them. Like, how do you have the time? I envy them, but good. All right. Well, we're here and we're back at our IDIC moment.
And this is a great conversation, Michael. Thank you. Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all next time.
All right. Love y'all.
Be well.